So good morning everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this Friday morning. So I'm Ken Shropshire. I'm the CEO of the Global Sport Institute. For those of you that were on the rooftop last night, on this day in 1886, Atlanta pharmacist John Pemberton created Coca-Cola as a hangover cure. So now stuff just flies up in your email, so that's today's. So thank you. This is our, one more housekeeping thing I'm supposed to give you. So the Wi-Fi code is group, all lowercase, G-R-O-U-P, all lowercase group, so you can be in touch with the world. I know, we all will panic if we can't do what we need to do. And just another thing with that, we're gonna try to get to content as rapidly as possible and kind of abbreviate a lot of different things, including the traditional reading of bios at length. So do leave your phones on. We're gonna give you some intro, but feel free to kind of Google people and get more information in the way that we can now that we couldn't historically, so you don't have to hear a whole long, who everybody is. So, and we're also gonna do, in terms of the panels, allow you to send questions via Slido. So that information will be up there, so your phones will be a very important part of what's going on here. Anybody that doesn't have a smartphone? Okay, yeah, my grandfather's not here, okay, good. All right, so welcome. And many of you know this year our focus has been on race and sports around the globe. This is our second year. Those of you who were last night, the focus the previous year was Sport 2036, the future of sport. Why race and sport around the globe? So a lot of reasons that a lot of you can think of. It was the 50th anniversary in 2018 of the '68 Olympics, and probably one of the most powerful race and sports moments of all time. I think fewer people realize, and you see Spike Lee running around with his T-shirt indicating this. This is the 400th anniversary of Blacks in America. Lerone Bennett's Before the Mayflower has been used to kind of pinpoint that date. So you can think about how important this is. And it's also a great moment to think about the progress or not that's been made during that period of time. I think that, so why are we doing this? And I think that by virtue of you being here, you have an interest in this area. And one quote that I've been using quite a bit this year, because this is, and with our guests here from South Africa, I think about this a lot more. We've gone through the centennial, the 100th birthday of Nelson Mandela as well. So just so significant in terms of thinking about how to make progress in the world, to examine his life. But the great quote, not from him, but from Bishop Desmond Tutu, about why we need to learn more on topics that we want to make progress on. And I just think about this so often when I see engagement on these issues, when I see what's going on in America today. The quote that I love from him is, "Don't raise your voice, improve your arguments." Don't raise your voice, improve your arguments. So what we want to do today is take you on a journey to improve your arguments, whatever they may be, to have more fact basis behind what you say and more understanding of the intricacies of these issues. So in this journey, and just to kind of take you through where we're going to go, I think it's always best, in the books I write, I always talk about, if you don't know where you're going, you might not get there and all that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea of where we're headed overall. And I'll be, rightly or wrongly, they have empowered me to kind of MC us through this whole thing. So I'll be up periodically to give some more insight. But here's where we're going to go. Yeah, the programs, and just maybe this will give it a little bit more context. We're going to start off with a conversation with the great Bill Rhoden, who I think's written the seminal book thinking about this whole space, and just actually a two-on-one conversation with him to think about these issues and kind of where are we and where are we going, how do we get there. Then we'll have a panel of people that I think, and I spent a lot of time thinking about, have actually gotten there. So I think we spent a lot of time on woe is me kinds of issues. Well, this is more of a we did it kind of panel. And all of them would say there's much more to do, but just a bit greater understanding. One of my favorite books focused on racial progress is one that is the stories of people written by David Thomas, the president of Morehouse. It's the stories of people who have been successful in corporate America, how to do it, which I think is an undertold kind of thought process in where we are. Next, we'll look at whether the policies that are out there are working or not around the globe. And a lot of what we'll do will be global kinds of issues. We'll then have what I think is an exciting set of one-on-one conversations looking at lawsuits that have been used to bring about racial progress and see how that kind of focus has worked in this setting. And then two more conversations, one with my multiple-time co-author and good friend, Dr. Todd Boyd, who, if you watch any documentaries, you see his face all the time. He's got some great insights on the culture and where we were and where we are now. Howard Bryant will talk with our own Dr. Victoria Franklin about the heritage and this whole progress that's taken place and what it's all about and why it's happened in the way that it has. We'll get a panel of some final thoughts, bring together some folks to kind of tie this all together. Then we will just kind of shift into next year's theme, which we'll talk about a lot more. Dr. Robert Turner will give a keynote on that issue. And then if you have consumed enough of your Coca-Cola from last night, we'll go back on the rooftop. Reception Roman numeral 2, I guess we'll call it. And then we'll have a screening, kind of, for those of you students that are here, this is a way to get a inexpensive date on the rooftop, but a screening of the movie Through the Banks of the Red Cedar, focused on primarily through the eyes of Gene Washington, the Minnesota Vikings Gene Washington, the Michigan State Gene Washington. If you're a Stanford guy, you know I'm making the distinction. And the integration of that team in the moment, and the Duffy Daugherty and the things that he did as a coach to really change the face of college sports. Many people know that the Texas El Paso story, but this is kind of the football version of the story, which I think is just a fascinating story. So that's the road that we will be following. Any questions or anything before we get underway? And we do have built in a lot of networking opportunities. So if you ride on this journey, I always tell people just let me be the blind horse that knows the way, and I think you will improve the way that you think about this whole space. I will improve the way that I think about this whole space as well. So without further ado, we're going to head into the first. Let's look at a recap of the past year. Just a quick video of the kinds of things that we've done, and we'll use some videos throughout. And I will tell you, by them entrusting me with this, something along the way will go haywire. So let me apologize in advance. I am pushing no buttons, but let's see what happens here. But here's the first video.
People are talking about this all over the internet.
All right, so it's been quite the year, and we're gonna dive in some more. Beginning now, first I'm gonna call up my colleague Brett Curlin, who's gonna join me in conversation with Bill Rhoden. Come on up, Brett. So Brett is the director of sports programs and a professor of practice at the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. That's the other thing that I'm screwed up today. Let me apologize to everybody. Whatever these schools are, and I know Dr. Crow had some great ideas, I don't know the names of all these damn schools. It's driving me crazy. Haven't been 30 years at one place where it was, the English department, so now all this stuff has all these fancier names. So bear with me on that as well. To introduce, and I know I said a couple things about him already, Bill Rhoden, come on up.
Where's this going?
So Bill did not.
Where's this going, Ken?
Yeah, so Bill had not seen it. right. This is your life, Bill. We really no.
I'm like, in 2019, when somebody says, "Oh, we got video," I was like, "Oh boy."
So, Brett and I were talking about this, and what we really want to try to do is pull out both the journalism trail and the race trail that Bill's been engaged with in so many ways so well. So I'm deferring a lot to Brett to kind of, as the professional journalist, to ask the right questions, and I'm going to intervene here and there. So, Brett.
So, Bill, you wrote your book, $40 Million Slaves, was published 12 years ago, 2007. In fact, you were joking yesterday that we probably need to up that number a bit from 40 million. But, the points in it now, probably far truer, even more true now than they were then. So we'll start with that. You write in the book that, quote, today's big-time college and professional players are far less prepared to deal with the racial realities that exist in America than any previous generation of athletes. Why is that, and how did we get here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before I start, I want to thank you, but I really want to thank you, Ken, for all the tremendous work that you've done, not just here, but over the scope of your career. You've been an inspiration for me and for a lot of other people. So I know that everybody knows it, but I just want to thank you for everything you've done. And I think the thing that we talked about, and Mike Haynes there, we've known each other since he was in college, actually, so how long that is. But I guess the frustration is, it's not really a frustration, we all have children. And what I find with young people is that a lot of them think that, maybe we did too, but that life and history started like today with them. No idea. And I think that that's devastating for, and I know a lot of women are frustrated by young women who have no idea of how we got to this point. And with African Americans, the devastating thing is that when you're a young person and you have no idea of the struggles that came before you, then you don't think there's anything to fight for. Like there's one point, I remember doing the research for the book, I was talking in February, at Black History Month, of course. And so at one point I finished, and it was like these middle school kids. So, the young, girl she raised her hand. She said, "Okay, Mr. Rhoden, that's all very nice, but who was the first white player to integrate the NBA?" Listen, she asked me, who was the first white player to integrate the NBA? You see what I'm saying? Now, it takes a minute to settle in. She thought because that generation grew up, they've grown up thinking that the NBA was like 80% black. To a lot of young people, there's always been like that. And the NFL has always been 70% black players. So to a number of generations of kids, they think that this kind of always been like this. And I think even with a lot of the players that you see, like you're going to see tonight, they think that this is kind of an entitlement. And I've challenged guys, like at Duke and other places. I was talking to the late Dr. Franklin, John Hope Franklin. And I was thinking, well, do you know any of these guys? I mean, do you know like Grant? He happened to know Grant because Grant Hill happens to be, and his dad would not allow him to be on that campus without knowing Dr. Franklin. But People like Barbara Jordan, I asked her before that, how many of the University of Texas players had you met? And she said she hadn't met any of them. Whereas if it was us, we'd make sure that the black players on that team knew these giants. But instead, how these places work, they kind of keep them separate. Because we don't want you getting any notions in your mind about escaping the plantation. We want you to run and jump and then leave. And I think, so anyway, to answer your question, I just think it's imperative to all of us who are in now positions of knowledge, after we kind of get our, get known and famous and all that kind of stuff, the next level is to make sure, like what people did to us, that we become the griots, and we begin to pass back information, and not pass back information as it's been fed to us, but to pass the real deal on. I know when you're working at these colleges and corporations, that kind of stuff, it's hard because everyone wants you to speak to corporate. Anyway, I think I don't know if that answers the question, but it's really just about, really, we really have to pass down the real history of our survival in this country.
You mentioned the NBA, more than 80% players of color, NFL's more than 70%, Major League Baseball's more than 40%. Meanwhile, our business of journalism, this is all according to the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sport, about 18% of reporters are people of color. So how does that imbalance impact the messaging you discussed, and you reference also in the book the I believe you call it the ignorance of the past.
Yeah, that part has been depressing. No, I don't want to use that word. Has been disappointing and persistent. There are places today in 2019, as recent I was at spring practice down in Florida, and I don't know how many of you spend time in press boxes in your local press box, whether you're in the NBA, NFL. You'll be stunned. You'll be stunned, and particularly if you're in college at the SEC and the ACC, the Big Ten, where you've got where if you would just look at the field, it would look like Howard and Morgan playing. But as the lens grows wider, and you take a wider look at the power dynamic, and you look at the press box, you think you're in like 1952, relative to not necessarily of color, but of black folks. And I kind of always draw that distinction, with diversity and all that. They'll say, well, come on, Bill, we'll look at the press box. And they know what's going through my mind. I'll be up there, and I'm like, man, particularly baseball. It's like awful. I mean, awful. Literally like when my mentor is Sam Lacey. And that's what he was talking about. And Sam died at age 100, but he was talking about that. It still exists. It's persistent. When I left the New York Times, I'd been there for 34 years. When I left there, I was the only black sports writer on the paper. At the paper. I was the only black sports writer there. So the question is, well, how do you change this? And change, two things. So change could take a long time, but it could also take 2 minutes. Not only is our profession segregated and locking out black folks, but I'm telling you, it's even worse. It's even worse when you talk about the invisible industries. I think you were talking last night about the business side of sports. That's terrible. Like I've been to countless Super Bowls, countless NCAAs, countless championships, and invariably when we get off the press bus and we go through the tunnels and all that, black folks aren't even in that space. You talk about event production, event management, stadiums, all the hundreds of things that are making these events go. We're not even in that space. The only time you start getting to black folks is as you go closer to the field, and then we come out there and start in the right time. Yeah, now you see all the black guys running and jumping. But the further you get away from the court, the further you get away from the field, we're not there. And I brought this up to during one of these things on diversity with the commissioner of the Big 12, Bob Berta. Not Bob Berta, but the commissioner,
Bob Bowlesby.
Bob Bowlesby, sorry. And so I brought this up because we have these conversations about diversity. And I said, Bob, let me just call time out, because our profession is like a plantation. When you look at this, and I described this whole thing. And to his credit, on the spot, I run one of the things I run at ESPN, the Undefeated. they set up a fellowship in my name. It's called the Rodent Fellows. And the Rodent Fellows is a year-long fellowship for 6 students from HBCUs, because I went to an HBCU, and that's my space. How do you create the next Bill Rhoden? Anyway, so they created this fellowship, which is a year-long, paid fellowship where the kids write for the Undefeated and for ESPN. They produce content. It's really a unique fellowship. Anyway, so Bowlesby said, wow, man, you're right. This is how do we help? So instantaneously said, okay, I want the Big 12 to become a partner with the Rodent Fellows. We're going to bring them to the championship games. We're going to bring them to our media day, not to as journalists, but we want them to work the other side. We want them to work in these invisible industry spaces, because a lot of our kids have no idea that these spaces even exist. And so after that, the NFL said, well, we like to do a partnership. And then the NCAA, 4 of our kids are going out to the Final Four, and that kind of stuff. So I'm saying that the change we're talking about, it can come with people in the right mind. They said, well, this doesn't take rocket science. We're going to do it right now and make it happen. We're going to hire black folks. We're going to hire women, and it's not going to be a whole lot. You hear people, oh, we're trying to find the qualified, that kind of stuff. So when you say, and I talked to your students yesterday, I said, well, when you guys and a lot of white kids, as you get up in the rank and you're going to become ownership things, when you ask, what can you do? You could do the right thing. That's what you could do. When you're sitting in a room, you find yourself sitting in a room and no black people there and there are no women there, you're in the wrong space, and it's up to you to do something. And that doesn't take, that's not rocket science. That's what's in your heart. Now, if you're a committed racist and you're a committed, neo-Confederate, okay, then cool. That's like the Celtics. That's like the Celtics playing the Lakers, right? And it's clear. It's you against us. You're not asking for any mercy, and we're not giving any mercy. But if you purport to be on my side, these fake liberals, which is kind of even more devastating, then, do the right thing.
We brought Bill here to uplift everybody. Let everybody know.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah, first thing in the morning. Anybody, needs some medication, please go get it now. No. So Bill, I'm listening, and Bill and I talk about this a lot, and one of the things we reflect on, and I see some other people in the room have this conversation too, are we caught in some kind of civil rights time warp in terms of the way that we think about this? And I say that meaning because there is an atmosphere that says there's so much progress that's taking place. There is this aura that there is all this progress, but we look at the NFL coaching numbers, we look at the press room, we look at ownership. That number stayed constant. There hasn't been a change. So I guess part of what I'm trying to get to is and the story is being told by journalists. So why isn't there a day-to-day understanding of this? Why doesn't that come, or maybe you've answered that question already as I'm asking it.
It's pretty clear. I think people understand. This whole thing of accidental racism. But maybe I ask you guys this, and maybe even ask the room this, and even guys who are like former athletes, So we always talk about these stats, that the NBA, and in fact, one of the things that Lapchek was mentioning in his report was this idea about the numbers, and the numbers all, could you give us those numbers, what he said about the, baseball?
About players, 81% players of color in the NBA, 73% in the NFL, and 43% in Major League Baseball.
Okay, so now the problem with that, in other words, when you get to black folks, and particularly in baseball, that number goes from 43% to what is it, 3?
7, 8, yeah.
That's mostly, I believe that's mostly Hispanic Latino.
So, and I think with me, whenever you bring that up, they say, well, diversity. And I say, okay, where are the black folks? Well, come on, Bill, you're always nitpicking, But other thing, and I ask guys, what does that really mean? What does the 83% black players mean if you're not using your leverage for anything? It's just another number. What does 83% black players mean if your organization is still 99% white? What does that mean? All that means is that you get your check, you finish practice, go out to the parking lot, and go ahead. I asked a couple guys, why don't you spend one day, instead of going, walk through your organization. Do me a favor, why don't you do that? Walk through the front office. Go upstairs. go vertically and horizontally. Go vertically and horizontally. Look at your organization. See how many people there look like you. And then let me know what that's saying about you. What are they saying about you? Said, no, this is your space here. And not only that, go through your agent's organization. And the people selling you your house, the real estate company. Why don't you go through there? How many people there look like you? And does that mean they're pimping you? So I was thinking of, okay, so I'm thinking about Zion Williams, okay? So now, what happens if Zion, so he knows he's only going to be in school for 8 months, right? At best. So Duke is not going to have to pay him, he's not going to have to give him a 4-year scholarship. However, there's probably somebody in Zion's, either his school or his community, a deserving young black person who probably has the board scores and all that, but doesn't have the dough to go to Duke. So Zion tells Duke and whoever is recruiting, let me tell you, the condition of me coming to your school is that, Juwan or Sally, whoever, is going to get a 4-year ride to Duke. Since you're not going to have to pay me, she's going 4 years to Duke. If you got a problem with that, then I'll move to Kansas State or I'll move to Stanford. Because somebody's going to say yes. The same teams that say yes, you know how you have these things where the high school coach ends up being on staff? They got no problem with that. But I think it's up to somebody's next to Zion, these guys, to say, man, this is not just about you. And imagine as long as One and Done has been in existence, what is that? How long has One and Done? Like,
I think it's since 99.
Yeah, so let's just pick a number. That's
20 years.
Yeah, about
15 years,
yeah,
right?
About 15, 20 years.
If people have been doing that from the outset in 15 years, how many other students would have been benefiting from them? How many attorneys would we have? How many, you know what I'm saying? But so I just think that somebody near Zion, these kids, have got to, let's take this to another level. Let's take it to another level. Yeah, everybody's going to be cheering for you, Zion, but what have you done and when you've got the leverage? See, that's the thing. He's got the leverage because and I know that the family, they think that they've been doing a favor. No, you are doing these guys a huge favor. You know how much money that you've been, anyway, so I guess the question to me is let's bring all this to another, where we've got leverage, let's use the leverage. And where do we have leverage? In the NBA with an 83%, with the NFL, and in big-time college basketball. But leverage is nothing without strategy and courage.
So why do you think athletes aren't using that leverage?
Because they don't have courage, and they don't, they have courage in terms of that. They have courage in terms of going through the brick wall. They have that kind of courage. And I don't want to generalize, but I think that, and maybe, I don't know, Kim, you've written about this as much as me. But I don't know if it's the courage, but I just think it's and I'm sure, like with Mike, when you were coming up and you were being recruited, and football's a little different, but you were one of those highly recruited athletes coming out of high school. Well, for the sake of argument, let's say, come on, Mike, let's work with this routine.
Making a point here.
Yeah, we'll move. I'm making a point. But the point is that I don't know if it's a matter of courage as much as it is you feel grateful that this school's just going to give you a scholarship. And who is Zion Williams going to propose this to Mike Krzyzewski and his parents or to John Calipari? How am I going to stand up to this guy, man? And it's still that kind of slave mentality that, looking white people in the eye. But when you realize that you can do this, because at the end of the day, when Zion threatens and the other kid, when the top 10 kids threaten to walk away, all of a sudden things kind of happen. Well, I think we can make that happen. Yeah, okay, who do you have in mind? Sally, okay, and the next thing you know, she's enrolling in Duke, or she's enrolling.
Let me try to push you to a silver lining somewhere. LeBron, Kaepernick, and I guess those, and this may be the answer. They may be external and not internal to the industry and what their focus is.
What do you mean? What do you say?
Are they examples of progress, change?
Yeah. No. I see what you're saying. Definitely LeBron. Well, yeah, both of them in their own different ways. LeBron has really created is creating a whole new model, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know if any of you have been listening to. I listen to a lot of radio. I drive a lot, so I listen to a lot of radio. What I found very interesting, and this kind of flows into these numbers you were giving about black folks radio. We tend to be, like, I listen to, let's say, Sirius NBA radio, I listen to Sirius NFL radio, so NBA. So it's always, there may be one or two black journalists who are just the hosts. Invariably, though, the black guys who are the whole co-hosts are athletes, and the white guys are just kind of like me, journalists, you know? So I noticed this trend that particularly now that LeBron is in LA, it's almost been this kind of glee that we finally got a window to get on him. But what they keep going back to is they say, well, you know, is he coming to LA to play basketball, or is he going to increase his empire? And they focus on how he's going to increase his empire. And they have a problem with that. I said, well, number one, as a mercenary journalist, I know that game. That's what all of us are trying to do. We're all trying to, like, do this gig, do that gig, do that. We're trying to do the same thing he's doing. He's just 100 million times more successful. You know, okay. So Kaepernick, I think, is deeper in that that's the lesson that, again, the slave master, you know how one enslaved person might escape, but they say, okay, you could escape, but we're going to hang everybody else. We're going to hang your family, you know, and we're going to put that we're going to hang them at the entrance of the town, just so you'll know who you're dealing with. So with Kaepernick, it's like that flogging at high noon. Said, okay, y'all got any doing that? This is what we're going to do. Now, what they won't say, but if all y'all do it together, we know we got a problem, because you are 70% of whoever. So I think that those are two great models.
Another thing you write, big point you make in the book is a sense of, and these are your words, a sense of being part of a larger cause has historically permeated nearly every action of the black athlete. You make the point that athletes have completely lost that connection to a lot of the struggles and such. You could argue, in fact, they've never been more disconnected from their communities and history than they are now. So how can athletes get that connection back, and then subsequently take advantage of the enormous platform that they have?
I think they have, and this will be brief. I think they have, and I think part of what you see with Kaepernick and a lot of younger athletes is that they realize that, but for their uniforms, they could be shot too. You know, there have been a lot of instances where black kids have been walking down the street. I remember there was one where, who's the owner of the Mavericks?
Mark Cuban.
Cuban. He was walking down the street, and there were three of his players who were walking toward him. They had hoodies on, but he didn't know they were his players. And he crossed the street to avoid trouble. And he said he was embarrassed when he found out these were three of his players. But I think a lot of players have realized that these kids getting shot, that, man, that could be me. Because if I'm not in the context of the arena, that could be me. So I think that's why we see people like Kaepernick and younger people really beginning to join the struggle.
Do we have time for one final question? Okay. So what's next? Where are we going?
I'm going to ask that question. I just think, it's, the older I get, the words, when we were children of the 60s, so everybody used to say the struggle continues. So like many other things, when you're young, it's just like another cliche. But as you get older, you realize that as African Americans in this country, we're involved in an existential struggle, that this never ends. And basically, I look at it as a relay race. We are, as black folks, are involved in an eternal relay race, that you run your leg, you run it as hard as you can, and then you hand it to the other generation. But you force the other generation to take the baton. And I think sometimes we have a problem, particularly as these kinds of things have become lucrative. Race, and talk about racism, has become lucrative. So, everybody wants to be. So the problem, you got a lot of people who, instead of handing the baton, they just keep running. They don't hand the baton, they just keep running. But invariably, you cannot win a race like that. You cannot win a race if you don't hand the baton. So I think that what's next for me, and you just hand the baton, and you tell the kids that you hand the baton to is that now I'm putting you, but you got to take the baton. I'm not just giving you the baton. You got to take the baton. So I think that's what's next is passing the baton and demanding the people we're passing it to take the baton.
Well, Bill Rhoden, as thank you. I mean, as someone who, as big as native New Yorker, probably read just about every column you wrote in those 34 years at the New York Times, and thank you for all that you do, your writings and your speaking. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.